Welcome to your Get That Nugget for GCSE English Language. Today we'll be concentrating on giving you a framework to answer Paper 2 Question 4, the comparison question. This session is to complement your lessons with your teachers and not to replace them in any way. Before we start, I think it's really important to make sure we know that question 4 is different to question 2. And that can be quite tricky because they do sound very similar. However, they are different, otherwise they wouldn't be separate questions. But this is a comparison of the attitudes or opinions of the writer. And this is about the writer. So it's not just about what the writer is doing, but it's about the writer, how they're thinking, how they're feeling, what they're imagining, what they're experiencing. And then we look about the methods they've chosen to show those thoughts and feelings. So, for example, if a writer was very angry about something, a topic they're discussing, it could be that they use lots of short sentences, they might use lots of exclamation marks, they might use aggressive words or violent verbs. So it's depending on what their opinion is, and then we look at the methods, because you need to understand the attitude or opinion or the viewpoint in order to see the methods they've been using or they've selected to show that attitude. So this question 4, is about the comparison of attitudes or opinions and the methods they've used or selected to show those opinions, what methods they've used to show that. Now, remember, paper 2 is texts that are non-fiction, so they are texts that will have a lot of emotion in them. They'll both be about the same topic, but there will usually, not 100% of the time, but usually both sources will have different opinions on the topic they're talking about. But don't get caught out, because sometimes they'll have similar, and it's not always that obvious, but usually I'd say 9 times out of 10 there are different opinions on the topic. But again, as just to repeat myself, I know getting a bit annoying, but this is a comparison of the attitudes or opinions and then the methods they use to show those opinions or attitudes. Okay, just to be really clear about that. So question 4, let's recap the assessment objectives as we always do. So again, bit of a sound like a broken record right now, but we're comparing the ideas and perspectives, and we're using the analysis that we can do about the writer's use of methods to convey those ideas. So what methods have been chosen to show the idea or perspective that they are feeling. This is what we need to make sure we're doing. And it is worth 16 marks, so it's something we need to make sure we're not skipping and we understand that we're very clear about what we're trying to do. So if you remember the previous cohort nugget, we looked at this question. So we're still working on the discoveries papers and going back and how we can improve our responses and our approach to those questions. So our question was, compare how the two writers convey their different attitudes to discovery they describe. And in the question, they will always give you some bullet points to try and help you and just to jog your memory. So to compare different attitudes, compare the methods, and then use quotes. So the bullet points are there to help you should you need them. My approach, if you remember, is that I call this the what, how, why question. It's a great way of remembering how I need to answer the question, or how people need to answer the question. It's also a great reminder of how to respond to the question, because those are actually quite different. You can plan beautifully, but some people struggle to then turn that plan into paragraphs because they're not quite sure how to structure that. And that's what I want to do today, is take our response from last time and have a really secure one. So quick recap, as I said, what, how, why. What is the attitudes and the opinions of the writer. How, so methods, how have they shown us that, with some quotes, and then the why, so the effects, why use those methods, and link back to the attitude. So the whole idea is that we're showing that we've understood the attitude and we've also understood the methods they've used to get us there. And you know, this is a firm favourite of mine. We've gone for the golden 3 yet again. We want 3 comparative paragraphs. So we want a what, how, why for source A, then we want a what, how, why for source B, and then we want 3 lots of that if possible. That's the aim, okay? So it's what, how, why, source A, what, how, why, source B, and then again and again and again. Now this should be one that you're quite familiar with, because it's very similar in some ways to the poetry comparison that you have to do for English literature. The difference being, obviously, is that you're writing about different things and you're writing about attitudes and opinions. However, the way that you have to compare two poems for literature, you're just comparing two texts here. So the way, in terms of the structure of a paragraph, you want to talk about one source and then you want to talk about the second source, okay? So please make sure you're doing what, how, why, but you must do it for both sources to be able to answer this question successfully. Okay, so now we've had a bit of a recap of how we approach the question. Let's have a look at what we did last time. So we went through, we annotated, we looked at the what, how, why, so we found the attitudes, we looked at the methods, and then we looked at some effects. And then we came up with a response that was quite a simple response, but we looked at that comparison. So we looked at our what, we had our how, we had our why, and then we did it again for the second one, if you remember. We'll look more at this later in the following nugget. So what I want to do first, before we start planning a response, is I want to make sure that we're using quotes that we haven't used already. So these we've already used. So we're going to go for source A for this one. We're going to go, in search of food, they are forced to wander endlessly. So let's be really specific about what they are actually talking about, because I think sometimes we get a bit bogged down with creating some sort of language analysis, question response, when actually, yes, we do need to do that, but equally we also need to make sure that we are answering the question, because otherwise we are not going to get the marks that we want to get, and that's obviously very important. So let's try and think about his attitude. So we know that Charles Darwin is a bit shocked about what he's seen. He's a bit disgusted. We know that already. We've worked through the paper. Here, as we go down, I would say he's almost confused about what he sees, because he doesn't really understand where they're living. He doesn't really understand what they're doing. So it's almost like he can't quite believe it. So he can't believe what he's seeing. He doesn't understand what it's like unusual to him when he's discovering these people, but he's not used to how they live. So he's not used to it. That's where his confusion comes from. But then we need to dig deeper than that, because this is great. This is our question 4. This is an attitude, and then we've kind of explained it. But now we need to look at the methods and the analysis of that. So if we think about what he's used, so he's used an adverb here, endlessly. And let's think about what that adverb actually tells us. It's almost like he just cannot believe that they would go around doing that. So it's like he doesn't really have any sympathy for them, because he's almost like they're ridiculous. They're really silly. It's like he can't quite believe it. So I know that links back to how we have talked about what he feels, but that's a good thing, because that means that we're right. Obviously, in an answer, we're not going to repeat ourselves, but for now, that's fine, because we can add to it. Again, we've got another thing here. We've got a verb here where, yes, again, it links to the idea that he can't quite believe that these people live this way. But let's go back to how he feels overall. That's very negative. So he's thinking about how, in search of food, they are forced to wander endlessly, like they're clueless. So he doesn't understand why they're wandering around for no point. It's like they almost have got no hope. They're not real humans. And that again links to that he can't believe it. He's not used to it. He's never noticed anything like that before. So let's leave that for now. Obviously there's much more you can do with that, but we're going to leave that one and we're going to go to source B. So if we look at this, so the anxious expectation. So again, I want to use something we've not used yet to show you the process from start to end. So anxious expectation. So we know that he's nervous because he says that he's anxious, but he's nervous in a positive way, isn't he? He's excited. We already know he's excited, so we don't want to keep repeating that, but we'll put it anyway because we might want to use it later. But more importantly, he's actually intrigued. Like he wants to know what's going on. He wants to see that. And there's almost that nerves, that anticipation. Look at this. So he's nervous, as we've thought about, but it's because of anticipation. He's nervous about what's to come. We almost feel a bit sorry for him because we want to know what he sees. So we go on that journey with him. Because his attitude, his opinion is that he's really excited and that he's really happy to see what he sees. But it's like we feel a bit sorry for him that he hasn't got there just yet. I mean, he will get there, but just not quite yet. But overall, what we're thinking about is that we get excited and nervous with him, and that's quite an important thing for the writers to do for us. That's the methods they've used to show that. So we might as well link that back to us. So if we take both of those things, and like I said, we can add more notes to it. And please don't think that when you get to question 4, because you've already done some analysis for 2 and 3, that it's the same. It's not. Question 4 is very different. As I said, we're looking at viewpoint and methods. So we want to make sure that we've got our notes here. And the more notes we have, the better our response is going to be. So if we make sure that we've got the what, how, why, we can then turn that into a paragraph. So we've got our what, confused, can't quite believe it. We've got our how, verbs and adverbs, and then we've got why. We've shown why that's important, because it's important that he tells us that, oh, it's awful, it's absolutely awful. And in fairness to him, we almost feel a bit of sympathy that he has to even see that. We feel sorry that he has to encounter that, because it sounds awful. He's made it sound awful. And that's similar with source B. We need to make sure we've got our what, how, why. So we've got our what, that he's nervous, he's excited, he's intrigued. Then we've got our how. So we talked about the ellipsis. Make sure you write that down. And we've talked about the idea that we're almost on a journey with him. And that's our why, because it shows that. So if you've got your what, how, why with each annotation, then you can lift that and turn it into an answer. And that's what we'll look at in the next nugget. For now, I'm going to leave you with a practice question. So you're still going to use the same sources. You're still going to use the I Am Malala sources. But your question for you to practice your annotations and planning on, remember, what, how, why. That's our very important what, how, why. So you're going to compare how the two writers convey their different attitudes towards the scenes they describe, and your what, how, why. So what attitude, how, method, why, effect. And if you practice your annotations and you practice your planning for this question, I'm sure your teacher will be really happy to look at that for you and give you any guidance that you may need and feedback.